Hi clarinet friends, this is Lee Seidner talking about Clarinet Fundamentals, and today's video is going to focus on intonation. Now, as clarinet players, let alone wind players in general, we hear about pitch and think about pitch all the time. One of the easiest ways I found to help with understanding and being more comfortable with intonation is understanding what is going on and what the natural tendencies are for the clarinet in general. So we're gonna first talk about what the pitch tendencies are gonna be in terms of the registers of the clarinet. I'm gonna go ahead and put up a picture of the registers, so if you need to reference this picture, just come back to this point of the video and see what we're talking about. Now, the general tendencies that I'm going to talk about here are going to vary from person to person, instrument to instrument, but as a general rule, these are pretty certain that it'll fall somewhere like this. When talking about the Chalumeau register, the lower we go, the lower the pitch tendency is going to be, meaning that E is going to have a tendency to be fairly flat, and as we go up the Chalumeau, the pitch starts to raise a little bit, with notes in particular D and E tending to be fairly sharp notes. The throat tones, that F all the way through B flat, they're going to have a tendency to be high or sharp. This sharp tendency is actually going to carry through the clarion register as well. And then when we get to the altissimo, you'll find that if you're more of a beginner student or intermediate student, the altissimo might be a little bit flat in pitch for you. If you are a more advanced student, probably older in high school, you may find that the altissimo is actually going to be a little bit high in pitch for you. Now, with knowing all of that information, there are ways that we can make adjustments. For example, in the throat tones, we can do what's called shading. Now, shading, or resonance fingerings is another way to say it, is when you put some variation of your right hand down while you are playing the throat tones. And this is going to include everything except for F and F sharp. So for G, A flat, or G sharp, A, and B flat, you are going to be able to add some additional fingers to those notes in order to bring the pitch down. These are also going to help bring some clarity to this register, as it's infamously known for being stuffy and out of tune. Now, the combination of fingers that you can use for these shading or resonance fingerings is going to vary person to person. Some of my favorites usually revolve around keeping this C pinky key down and having at least the second and third finger in my right hand, and occasionally the third finger in my left hand down as well. And you can hear the difference if I just play open G. Just adding those fingers down adds a little bit of a boost in the brilliance of the sound. It also brings the pitch down. And again, these resonance fingerings are going to vary from person to person, and they're also going to vary from note to note. So the same one that you have a favorite on for G might not hold true for G sharp, A flat. You just have to experiment, use a tuner, see which one is playing the most in tune with the most clarity in the sound, and that's going to be the best one for you. To adjust for pitch in the altissimo, particularly when you are playing sharp in that register, there are a few different fingerings that we can make sure that we're utilizing to help with our pitch. You'll want to make sure for everything above C sharp, we are putting this E flat pinky key down. It's going to vent and allow for a more resonant sound, and it's also going to bring the pitch up so that we are not under the pitch. We're not going flat. Now, for notes like E flat or D sharp in the altissimo, a common fingering that you may see is to have your second and third finger along with your middle finger here in the E flat key. This is not a super stable fingering, although it is convenient. We'll want to use the chromatic fingering for this instead, which changes out this middle finger in your right hand for the first finger in your right hand and adds this sliver key down. Now, this fingering is going to be way more stable, and it is also going to be more in tune, allowing us to play a bunch of different passages a lot easier, particularly when we're having to go to or from a D. We won't be flipping anymore. We will actually just be using this sliver key, making our lives a million times easier. The altissimo F can be a very resistant note for us to play. It takes some getting used to for sure, but there are some ways that you can help adjust the pitch and make it easier to speak. So instead of just using the normal F fingering that we have, which is second finger, third finger, and the C sharp key, along with your thumb and register key, and the pinky key here, that will create the F, but if it's under pitch or grunting, we can add this sliver key, which will help raise the pitch. Now, when we're applying this sliver key, we want to make sure that we're actually not touching any of the tone holes. So if you can see, I'm right on the edge of it. I'm not flat on it because it would hit the tone holes. I'm right on the edge. And you can hear it's more brilliant, it spoke immediately, and if I go back and forth, you can hear the difference that it does in the pitch. Another alternate F fingering is what we call the long F fingering. The long F fingering can be really convenient because it speaks very easily. It does have a tendency to be on the high side, so we need to be cautious of our pitch in that sense, but it is something that is not super difficult to get to fingering wise. You're gonna play as if you were playing a clarion D, and you just add the C sharp key right here. It speaks right away. It just tends to be high, so be cautious when using that fingering. One of the most resistant fingerings that we'll find is an altissimo F sharp. The standard fingering is thumb, register, and the middle finger of your left hand, along with the E flat key here. For developing or even advancing students, this note can be very, very resistant, and you have to make sure that your voicing is appropriate and that the airstream is very continuous. A fingering for F sharp that speaks much more freely is the long F sharp fingering. So for the long F sharp fingering, we have our thumb and register key, first finger and second finger in the left hand, and then we have 1, 2, 3 in the right, along with the E flat key. It speaks right away, it is very brilliant, it is very resonant. It also has a tendency to be on the high side, so just be cautious in terms of pitch that we aren't biting for this note to speak. It's going to speak very clearly on its own. Lastly, the altissimo G has a bunch of different fingerings that one can use. The chromatic fingering is perfect for exactly what it entails, the chromatic scale, because it allows us to go from this F sharp, the standard F sharp, to the G just by adding this sliver key. Now with that fingering for G, we have to make sure that we keep the pitch up, that we really push the air through so that it speaks clearly. An alternate version of G that people often use is thumb and register with the middle finger of the left hand, 1, 2 in the right hand, and the E flat key. I personally don't love this fingering. It can be very abrasive and it is extremely sharp. A fingering that might not necessarily be as easy to get to, but does speak clearly and has a beautiful sound, is thumb and register 1 and 3 in the left hand, 1 and 3 in the right hand, along with the E flat key. As you can hear, a little bit more of a muted sound than the G fingering we previously just heard. So if you can get used to using this one, it's really, really helpful, just not easy to get to. A fingering that is easy to get to and just involves making sure that you push the air is an overblown B. So we take the B fingering in the clarion part of our register and we just overblow it so that it goes up the partial to the G. It speaks quite well, is usually fairly in tune as well. So if a passage accommodates you being able to play an overblown B, it is definitely a fingering that I would recommend. Outside of the registers of the clarinet, there are also different pitch tendencies that can happen from the outside that influence the clarinet. So if we're talking about temperatures, if it's cold in the room that we're playing in, then the clarinet's going to have a very strong tendency to be flat and under pitch. it's a very warm room, or you've been playing the clarinet for a long time, the tendency is going to be for the pitch to go up and be sharp. Our reeds also very much affect the pitch. If we're playing on a reed that is too tough for us and it sounds stuffy or a little gravelly, it's gonna make the pitch go up and be sharp. This is because in order for us to get this reed to speak and really vibrate the amount that it needs to, we naturally have to add more pressure to do so, which will, as we've mentioned, raise the pitch. If the reed is too soft, the exact opposite will happen. The reed is vibrating way too much and the pitch will go and sag and be very, very flat. Lastly, the dynamics that we're playing at can affect the pitch of the instrument. For clarinets, which is a little different than other woodwinds, the softer we play, the higher the pitch goes. So softer means sharper. And the louder we go, the lower the pitch goes. Louder, flatter. Now, this is a lot of information to be thinking about in terms of our intonation and pitch. But the key is just understanding what is going on with the instrument aside from how you're influencing it. Once you start thinking about these things, it all becomes natural and the information begins to stick. Hopefully, all of this information was really helpful for you and it can be applied to all of your practicing techniques in the future.